Yeah, I wanted to say, because it was new, right? 2 months.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming out here to the Rink Studios. Give yourself a round of applause for coming out to the Rink. And if you haven't already, I can still see with my own eyes, there's a lot of cups on that back table full of snacks for free, so please, thank you, Simone, for bringing those. Somebody raise your hand over there in the back, please. She graciously offered to pick up snacks. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, can I get snacks? I said, absolutely you can. So please, grab some free snacks, get a drink from our bartenders in the back, support this great place, and enjoy yourself for the next hour and a half or so as we have a great conversation. My name is Isaac Gonzalez, and I'm lucky enough to serve on the leadership team here for our local Strongtown chapter, a Strong SacTown. And I'm also the founder of a group you may have heard of called Slow Down Sacramento. Hey, thank you. I have the honor of being your discussion facilitator for this event tonight. Tonight, we're bringing together neighbors, advocates, and thought leaders from across the country to explore what it really means to rebuild strong communities. But before we get going, I do want to say thank you to some people today that made this whole event possible. First of all, the roof we're under, the venue we're at tonight, the Rink. Thank you for hosting us, and especially, yes, thank you to the Rink, come on. On short notice, they really have moved heaven and earth. Once again, was there any of you here for Dixie Ann just back in May? Who was here? Raise your hand for Dixie Ann. Another great event we had here, so we're so glad to be back here again. A wonderful event we had for the Dixie Ann Alleyway Project. But beyond the Rink, I want to say a very special thank you to Candace Brooks with the Del Paso Boulevard Partnership. Candace, are you in the room? There you are at the table. Thank you, Candace. Candace, her leadership, her hospitality have made this possible. The partnership has been working tirelessly to reimagine this corridor as a thriving and welcome destination. It's fitting that we're having this conversation right here on the Boulevard. That's why I wanted to have it here. We would not be in this room without Candace. So please, again, if you see her on the way out, give her your appreciation and a good round of applause for her. And as you know, tonight the admission was free for this event. That was intentional because we wanted to ensure that we did not create any barriers between those who wanted to hear from our speakers and share their insights during our Q&A portion. Too often we hold discussions like this in the backyards of the people that are most affected, but intentionally or not, we create barriers between their participation with financial barriers and other issues. So the partnership has graciously fronted the cost of this venue tonight, and we are attempting to recoup as much of the cost as possible so that the partnership's resources can go back to their main purpose, which is the revitalization of this historic corridor. So if you're in a position at all where you can help us return some of the money to the partnership, you can visit the Eventbrite link that brought you here, and there's a donation ticket you can purchase for any amount whatsoever. Or if you like Venmo, you can scan the Venmo code on the screen or on the pieces of paper that are in the room. All the money that we collect tonight is going to go back to the partnership to help offset the cost of this event. I also want to acknowledge SACOG, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, for their efforts to bring Chuck to this region this week. And also want to acknowledge the City of Sacramento, with whom I've had the pleasure of working with on many endeavors. And I know there are many city staffers in the room, so if you're a City of Sacramento staffer, or maybe even a commissioner of a board, raise your hand. City of Sacramento folks that are here tonight, thank you all for coming out here. And all the community leaders and all of you who are in the room tonight, your commitment to this city's future and the time you donate to that pursuit is what give the ideas we're going to discuss tonight real meaning. Now, I'm not a historian, but I do want to set the table just a moment for our discussion. Del Paso Boulevard is one of Sacramento's most historic corridors. It was once the beating heart of old North Sacramento, a place where people shopped, gathered, and built community before freeways and suburban expansion shifted the city's center of gravity. Today, the Boulevard still holds incredible potential, and you can see it in the local businesses like this one and many others that have weathered the hard years, the artists who keep this district creative, and the residents who continue to believe in its future. And like so many older corridors, Del Paso faces real challenges: disinvestment, vacant storefronts, and the lingering effects of decisions that were made decades ago when this area was literally cut off from the rest of the city. But we're seeing momentum return through small community-led projects and now even city-led projects that show what's really possible when people work together. One example, again, if you were here in May, you remember, is the Dixie Ann Clean and Green Alleyway project, which we just completed a few blocks from here. That effort transformed neglected alleys into community spaces with new paving and art, native landscaping, and it was informed and driven by the residents who wanted to take back ownership of the neighborhood. And I believe in many ways, that's a living example of what Strong Towns teaches us. Start small, learn what works, and build strength, block by block. Move me back. I'm in the dark. Okay, yeah, let's move me back just a bit. And right, maybe here I'm in the light. Does that look better? Let's go. All right, here we go. Now I'm in the light. Yes, thank you so much. With that, always a work in progress, folks. With that, I want to introduce our panel this evening. Ari Green is a Sacramento-based Ari Green is a Sacramento-based community advocate and engagement specialist who has spent years working directly with residents to build trust and drive neighborhood-led change. Ari's work centers around authentic, inclusive engagement, especially in communities that have long felt left out of planning and investment decision. She brings a powerful on-the-ground perspective, and she lives just a few blocks from here. This is her home community, which is why I really was happy she could make it with us here tonight. Our next panelist is Donald Gensler. He's an Art in Public Places Manager with the City of Sacramento's Office of Art and Culture. Donald is both an attorney and a visual artist whose work bridges public space, neighborhood identity, and creative expression. For more than 20 years, he's created public art projects across the country and abroad, using art to strengthen communities and tell stories. And then our final community panelist is Mikayla Taylor. She's the co-board director of the Sacramento Community Land Trust, a role through which she advances equitable, community-led ownership and housing stability. Her work centers on preserving affordability and giving communities real control over land and development. We invited her tonight to bring that essential perspective on how long-term stewardship and justice must be part of our rebuilding process. And then lastly, it's my great honor tonight to welcome Charles Marohn, founder and president of Strong Towns, best-selling author, and one of the most influential voices in reshaping how cities think about growth and resilience. Chuck, as his friends call him, and I'm going to call him Chuck tonight, has spent years helping communities rethink their relationships with infrastructure, money, and people, challenging us to ask, are our investments truly making us stronger or just more bigger and more fragile? So tonight, maybe we can connect those ideas to what's happening across the country and right here in Del Paso Boulevard and across Sacramento. So Chuck, many of you in this room have been inspired by your message, but for those of us that are new to Strong Towns, can you share what this movement is all about and why it resonates with cities like us?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody you're very, very kind. And I am grateful to everyone who's here tonight to be part of this. When I think of Strong Towns in action, I think about Sacramento. And I think about the work that, SacTown is doing here, because it really is the best of what we are as a movement. I started writing back in 2008 about why cities were going broke. And I really started writing about my own town. We were doing large infrastructure projects. I was working on many of them. And at the end of the day, looked and said, this actually costs more and gives us more long-term obligations as a community than it's going to produce in tax base. And I don't care that we like to drive to Walmart, and I don't care that people love the Chick-fil-A. We're not paying for it. It's actually making us weaker. It's actually making us a worse place to be. It's robbing us of our capacity, and it's robbing us of the things that we actually say we are about. That was a message that, to me, was a Central Minnesota message. And I started to share it. And as happens in the internet age, people start to read it, they start to pass it around, they start to share it. Ultimately, they started inviting me to come and speak at places about this. And I wound up in 2012 here in California. And I want to share this story because it really changed my life, my perspective on things. I was invited to speak in Redding and in San Diego, and did, I think, 10 talks in between those two over the course of a week. I I saw your entire state. I visited city after city after city. And in each one of them, I saw people who were trying to do really good things, really cared about their places, but were making investments that were ruining their city, were making them poorer, were robbing them of capacity. And as I talked about my town, people would come up afterwards and say, that's my place too. That's exactly the same thing that we're doing. And it reinforced the idea that this post-war, what we call the suburban experiment, this new kind of innovative way of building cities, where we threw away kind of old wisdom on how to build places that were productive and embarked on this new strategy to create lots of growth, lots of jobs. I talk about staying out of the Great Depression. How do we kickstart our economy? Those ideas were based on a different perspective, a different understanding of what it means to build a place, that we now have 75, 80 years of evidence to show that not only does it not make us wealthier, not only does it rob our cities, our local governments, our small businesses, our families of wealth and capacity, but it actually doesn't leave us with places where people thrive, where humans are better off, where we experience a broad prosperity. And it's jarring for me to be an American in 2025 and to recognize that while our GDP might be higher and the velocity of money in our economy might be greater than it was in 1925, the quality of life that most people experienced in 1925 was in many ways measurably better than the quality of life we have today. And that just does not need to be the case. So I'm grateful to be here in what is a great neighborhood, one that needs a little bit of love and a little bit of TLC, but is a great neighborhood to have this conversation with the three of you and everybody else in the audience. So thank you.
Well, wonderful. Well, before we get into the panel discussion, I just want to ask you one more quick question. You visited hundreds of communities across the country, across the world. What do the strong ones have in common, and what traps do you see cities fall into the most often?
The strongest towns are the ones, and I'm going to say this, and I recognize where I am in Sacramento. The strongest ones are the ones that were gifted the majority of their community prior to the Great Depression. When you have neighborhoods that have a walkable DNA, have a DNA that is designed to evolve and change, ones that respond really quickly to kind of incremental investments here and there, what we see is that these are places that not only have kind of a floor on how low they can go, but have tremendous upside in like multiple dimensions. If you think about it in terms of the United States, the further east you go and the further north you go, the more kind of pre-Great Depression city that there is relative to the total size of the city. The further west you go and the further south you go, you have the opposite. And in these places, what we see is that the greatest obstacle to overcome is inertia. This is the way we've done things. And that's particularly true when you have a concentration of affluence, because those places like don't feel the pain, or don't feel like the reason to change. I feel like your city here sits at this interesting intersection of that matrix, because you are both in kind of like a very fragile place. The vast majority of your community was built post-World War II. Because of that, it has inherent lack of adaptability. It has an inherent lack of flexibility to it, a lack of financial productivity to it. It's really, really hard stuff to work with. But there's a lot here that was kind of pre that time that we can work with and build on. When I've seen you do it, you've seen tremendous responses from it, and you are not so high on the affluence scale that you're not motivated to do it. You have actual, like, you can look around at each other and be like, we can make some changes here that will make things a lot better, and we're highly motivated to do it, unlike places that are, let's say, a little bit wealthier. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
I've never been called so mid before as a Sacramento, but I hear you. 100%, brother. I'll take it. All right, well, we're talking tonight about rebuilding strong communities, particularly in places disrupted by mid-city infrastructure. I'm going to start with Ari tonight. Well, Ari, we talk about building corridors like Del Paso back to life, and you work directly with residents on engagement and trust building. What does the authentic engagement we need look like when we talk to these people who've been unheard for decades about opportunities for change and growth? I think it is. You can say.
Is it on?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, perfect. There we go. Okay, so hi, good evening, everyone. I'm gonna try to answer this question one from like a community perspective, but then also as like a city staff perspective. So from a community perspective, I feel like it depends on the age group of the community, and so when you have a older age group of community who are tired and who have been here for decades, to see the decades of disinvestment, you can't just shut them up. You need to give them the space to say what they need to say, because they were probably here before you were the staff member trying to fix previous staff members' work, right? And I say that from a city perspective because I understand as staff we hear the venting and the trauma, right? And sometimes we're like, okay, but now what's next after trauma dumping, right? But you don't want to, a part of the authenticity and building the relationship with city staff and community members is also like community engagement. You can't just say, we're gonna do this right now and do an accelerated timeline for your engagement. It's years of authenticity. So sometimes maybe the first year does look like you listening, city staff listening to the community members' trauma dump. And then when they start to heal or trust you, you start to move the pedal and you can go. And so sometimes it looks fast and sometimes it looks very slow. And I will say, not even just city of Sacramento, but any city, the processes are very slow, right? And so the same way that cities ask for patience from community members for its slow processes, I would say to city staff that you also should give your community members the same timeline for their patience as well as you churn the wheel to get things done. I will say as on the community engagement team for the city, we have levels of engagement, and the first level is level one, it's informing. And so that means that we meet with folks and we're just simply informing you of a program or a project. And then the highest level is 5, in which we empower community members. And when we empower you, we're leaving the decision in your hands to choose what you want your community to look like. And I think that when everyone starts to look at those levels of engagement, you create an authentic relationship because you're being honest with the community members about what they can do. And so when you meet with them, you let them know, I am informing you, this is not a decision-making portion. But when there is time for them to make a decision, you allow them to make the decision for their communities. I don't think it's fair to tell communities what they should have in their community, especially if you don't live there, because you don't really know. Like I feel like a lot of time professionals want to take a paternalistic standpoint and say, this is what your community needs, but that's not true all the time, even if we are the professionals and we know what's going on.
Thank you so much. And I love what you said about trauma. Trauma can never be healed until it's acknowledged, right? So
Correct.
Thank you for that very much.
Yeah.
And when we look at this corridor and those transformations, we do see lots of public art. So Donald, public art becomes the visible sign, the face of investment in many communities, or sometimes it precedes investment, right? We see lots of artist investment before things are developed. How do we use art to rebuild identity and pride along corridors like this? But touching on what Ari said, welcoming the residents into that change.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think of 2 words here, and I'm going to kind of weave these throughout. And the two words are engagement, which I just heard about wonderfully here, and appropriation. And you'll see how I kind of think about those things in the workbook. Visual artists love to talk about appropriation. We love to steal stuff and then reconfigure it in a new way, right? So I think we can do a lot of the same stuff. And in fact, it's people like Chuck that can kind of bring us some ideas that then we can change and adapt to ways that fit really well in our communities. One of the wonderful ideas that I was reading recently was this idea that, start small, start incrementally, start with this shack, right? And then that's how you build the city, right? You don't just start by saying all of a sudden let's just build this huge building and infrastructure. You start small, you start incrementally. And so one of the ways that I saw that personally and how I see public art playing a role there was actually when I went to visit New York City back in 2016. I used to live in that area, and I went back, and all of a sudden they have blocked off Broadway. I said, what the heck is going on? They blocked off Broadway with large planters. And in fact, when I then later read Charles Montgomery's book, Happy City, he talked about this exact thing, that he was looking at a small place called Bogota, Colombia, where the mayor had seen city design as an important thing, something that should be should change the city, that's where the investments should be. And so there were conversations in New York around this idea, and it wasn't like let's change it, let's change the engineering of the streets. It was let's put about 4 or 5 large concrete planters, put some plants in them, and block off that street, and that's all it was. And so for me, that can be public art. Changing the space can be public art, but it has to happen with a kind of involvement and an engagement that can only happen. I love that you were talking about this. That can only happen when you give it time. So we're involved in a couple different projects now. We're doing an entire year just of engagement before we even get to the sculptural work. So I think that's really important. Another thing, and again, I told you, appropriation. I take other people's ideas and then I want to reconfigure them. So if I think about another wonderful book by Jonathan Rose, A Well-Tempered City, he talks about the metabolism of the city. So I think public art can play this role when we are training artists, and then those artists are then coming back and being able to give back to other people in the city, learn and kind of give them some of the kind of knowledge and experience that they've had. And I'll tell you the truth, it also is a little bit of paying it forward, right? So we have this opportunity. If you have this opportunity, if you are a business owner or you own a property and you have an opportunity potentially to rent at a below market rate to artists, maybe you could pay that forward and allow that artist to have a year-long lease instead of a 5-year commercial lease in your space. And I know that's happening right here on Del Paso Boulevard. Public art gives you that opportunity because public art doesn't need to be one thing. It doesn't need to just be the very large monolithic sculpture. It could, but it could also be a whole series of interventions. And I love it, again, appropriation. One of the artists that I had a chance to meet and was recently talking about in the office today was a performance artist named Vito Acanci. And he has this wonderful quote, and he says in his book, his essay, Public Space and Private Time, Vito says, public art comes in through the back door, like a second-class citizen. Instead of bemoaning this, public art can use this as this marginal position to its advantage. Public art can present itself as the voice of marginal culture, as the minority report, as the opposition party. Public art exists to thicken the plot. And I do think that you're never going to see out of our office one approach, because there's so many voices out there. There's so many voices here in Sacramento. There's so many ways that we can integrate public art into what we do. a big part of that is through an engagement process that really means we spent time, but it also means that we give it a chance to kind of thicken the plot, to change a little bit of what you're used to seeing in a space, and sometimes artists and interventions can be exactly that change.
Wonderful, thank you, Donald. And I love what you said about offering that reduced rent to those artists, giving them the opportunity. But when we think about housing, obviously we know the advantages that home ownership brings. When I was working with the city on the Dixie-Ann project, we did door-to-door outreach, and we did the research, and we found 85% of those households in that neighborhood were not owner-occupied. They were often owned by landlords, and actually, to our amazement, there was only one or two landlords that owned more than two houses. It was mostly single-owned. It wasn't like a large landlord who owned a block. And that made it very difficult, to do the outreach. A lot of sporadic energy across the universe about who wants to do what, where, and why. So when we talk about home ownership and those advantages, from a housing and land trust perspective, Mikayla, what role does community ownership play in making the revitalizations we're talking about today equitable?
Yeah, definitely. So home ownership, or community ownership, is literally everything, right? It's like stability that folks can stay in their homes and be able to continue to grow with their neighborhoods. And when folks are displaced through disinvestment or just like investment elsewhere, we lose the culture of communities, right? And so we basically, it's like we lose the recipes all over the place. And so when it comes to community ownership as well, it's like community ownership is nothing without making sure there is the stopgaps to make sure that, I'm thinking about the fire that happened in LA where there was an entire community of people who owned homes, who have been there for generations, who everything burned down, everything is gone. And so the community ownership has to stay with community, but it also has to be protected, and decisions that are made by outside agencies have to also make sure that they're community in mind. So I really appreciate you speaking to the trauma, right? Because as community members, we experience trauma every single day. And we experience it on such a micro level that it just builds up over time. And taking a moment to take it all in. But so when that trauma builds up over time, and then you also don't even own your home, so then you're always thinking about what if I lose this? What if I'm not able to keep staying? Maybe your family lives down the street. Maybe someone your play cousins, your play uncles, right? So when it comes to community ownership, it literally is everything. It is making sure that communities can continue to thrive with the people who have put their blood, sweat, and tears over generations into communities. And we speak about the culture in terms of art and how that shows up. And I love how you said about public art and the quote you had stated about that is the resistance. And you see it, right? You see people shifting and creating their communities to fit the way that their lives work. Right? So it's I could ramble forever. But yeah, those are the big things that I'm thinking about, and this really big thing around displacement. And I really appreciate you bringing in some data about how home ownership even works within this community, because we are sitting in a place that is historically disenfranchised, and also they are really feeling the chokehold of where we are in our society. And I'm thinking about, sorry.
It's touching. It's touching.
Yeah, it's just, it's all my thoughts are coming in at once right now, so I think that's what's happening. And so I'm just I want to say this thing, and I want to say that thing, and I want to make sure that we get all this stuff down. And I think I just have to be you know what? It's okay. I'm learning in public and saying a lot of stuff right now. So anyway, I'm going to stop there. That's okay.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Isaac, can I add something?
Yes,
really
please.
quick?
Please.
So I appreciate both of the things that you guys said. There's a book called Root Shock by Dr. Mindy Thompson Fullylove. I might have flipped her hyphenated name backwards, but she's a social psychiatrist, but also studies urban renewal, and she writes on the 1960s and the 1970s, and she talks about how displacement is not just physical, it's cultural. And so when you remove people from their space or their place, it really, really shakes their ecosystem because it's a part of where they are. And so I like that you said, I think you specifically said it's a stability thing, but also when people are displaced, we lose a culture because we're not just losing the houses or the apartments, we are losing an identity of a neighborhood, which public art plays a part in. And so I just wanted to like bring that full circle because I saw the synergy there.
Thank you, Ari. I appreciate that. You know, Chuck, I've heard so much through SongTowns, either blogs or even parts of the books where we talk about some micro developments, creative opportunities for tenants to take temporary ownership or use of properties that are stand vacant. When you think about that, have you seen some good examples that could be mirrored along our corridor here where landlords or the city work together to allow for pop-ups for local residents to start that entrepreneurial phase of their life?
I want to answer your question, but there's a part of me that wants to push back a little bit on it too. So you had the chart.
Oh,
Yeah. And like it had the different stages of, okay. So you said the first one was inform. We're going to inform people, right? Here's what we're doing. And then the top one was empower. But right under power is like this collaborate step. And to me, I feel like that's the one, like you're kind of getting, how do we collaborate better? If we look at the way that government works, local government is really broadly oriented itself around vertical flows of capital. And I know that's kind of like an abstract notion, but if you go into City Hall today, you will see people who are very interested in what is the state going to either dictate that we do or have money that we can tap into. What can we do to collaborate with the state? What's the federal government have in terms of programs we can tap into or grants we can access? And who's the outside developers with money that will come in that we can utilize to do things that we want to do here? That vertical orientation misses out on all of that opportunity to collaborate. Jane Jacobs called cities a co-creation. And to me, that idea of co-creating is one that, and I'm going to say this to you in a loving way, I think gets put on the margins as something we do at worst as a kind of superficial thing we do as part of informing and imposing, and at best something we do kind of in neighborhoods that, yeah, nothing's going to happen in this neighborhood, let's just keep talking and dealing with our trauma and what have you. I think that a true strong town, an approach that really leans into collaboration, is one where the local government, instead of being oriented vertically, orients itself horizontally. We have this thing called the 4-step process that we have developed and taught to cities and groups all around the country. The idea is, instead of making public investments largely the way we do it now, what's the money we can get from the state, and then we go and we have a public hearing and we go through a checklist performative process of listening to people and checking all the boxes. Instead of that, what we do instead is go out and step 1, humbly observe where people struggle. Step 2, ask ourselves, what's the next smallest thing we can do to address that struggle? Step 3, we go do that thing. We don't wait 6 months or hire consultants or do committees. We just go do it. It's a small little thing. And then step 4 is we repeat that process over and over. I feel like when I'm in California, I enter this weird zone of hyper participation, right? You have the most performative participation process of any place in the country. You have endless amounts of hearings and discussions, and in fact, a lot of the discussion in this state around housing in particular is how do we bypass all of that and get housing built, because it's preventing you from doing things. But the reason it prevents you from doing things is because you have limited yourself to only doing large things that when they are built are permanent and done. And that's the limiting problem, not the engagement. When you go out and you do a tactical urbanism project, you go out and you do something small and incremental because you observe people are having a hard time crossing the street here. I observe that. I'm going to go out and I observe this struggle. I go out and put in a crosswalk or some cones or some straw bales and paint, and I try to make it easier for people to cross. You don't have to have a public hearing about that. Not because you don't care what people think, but because people are going to tell you what they think based on how they react to what you did. And if what you did is small and incremental in the next thing, you will learn from that. And if it doesn't go well, you will just undo it and try something else. But if it does go well, you build on it, and you build on it, and you build on it. So your public collaboration doesn't end up being, hey, show up to our meeting at our time and stand at our podium and tell us what you think. It is live your life, and we will try to make it better as we go. And if we make it better, you will use it and show us that it's better, and we'll keep doing more of that. And if what we do doesn't make things better, your actions will demonstrate that that's not the direction we should go, and so we won't do that anymore. We'll do less of it. I feel like we are as close to Silicon Valley as you could be without being in it. And I know there's a lot of positives and negatives that come from that. One of the positives is if you watch how these companies deliver their products, their apps, their software, they are hyper vigilant about watching how their users struggle to use their products. We're delivering a city, and we generally don't give a damn about how the people actually use it. If we humbled ourselves to say, how does the individual user struggle to use this block we built? How do they struggle to use this street that we created? How do they struggle to use this park or access this park? What we would find is that we have a million small little things we can do right now that would cost us very little, that would make people's lives way better, and in doing so would actually increase the wealth and capacity of our neighborhoods and directly accrue that to the people who are there now. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but that's kind of where I wanted to take it.
If I could just add real quick, I really appreciate you saying that. We talk about this kind of stuff all the time in terms of engagement, and you won't be surprised that sometimes it's just this tack on. Sometimes, I know I should say that, but sometimes that's what we get in the city is, oh yeah, did you do your engagement? Check that box. And so what you're really talking about is an active engagement, not a passive engagement. Not I just went to a community meeting and I talked but you physically went out and did something. You made something together, and you kind of saw that as a way of potentially just seeing that issue together. And that has been at the foundation of a lot of the work that we've been trying to do in the city, in trying to do these kind of smaller incremental projects that really do involve people, not just in a kind of, just kind of sit back and listen to me, but how do you actually get to participate in some way and be part of that engagement process?
Can I make it too? I love what you said. I want to make it less touchy-feely because I'm an engineer, and I'm going to say this as an engineer, right? We have overbuilt the infrastructure in our cities. We've built it beyond our capacity to actually have the tax base to maintain it. What that means is that we have too many roads, too many pipes, too much sidewalk to maintain, too many parks to maintain. We've built too much stuff, and we can't maintain it. If you recognize that, the first response that you should do is say, we're done building that stuff. Like all of the capital improvement plan we have to go out and expand this and build that, all those things should just go away. Just throw them in the garbage. They should be done. But you still have capital improvements. What do you do? How do you do that? Well, if you actually want to make capital improvements that make you money, make you better off, improve your financial capacity, you have to go into your neighborhoods and say, how do we make them better places to live? And you can't do that with a big project and a checkbox public opinion. You actually have to go out and do block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood level work. It's small, it's incremental, it doesn't scale well to ribbon cuttings and federal grants, but it's actually the thing that will pay off financially and on the softer side in a human way. And I guess I didn't say that to belittle what you said, because I really think it's important, but I've been in so many meetings where someone comes in and says, plant trees, make the park nicer, make it easier across the street. And that's like the thing you do after you get the big engineering project done. It's like, well, how do we also then do this? It's art. Art is like the thing you sneak in the back door, right? It's the afterthought. And the reality is that we've built all the stuff we need to build. Now we need to make better use of it. And that makes the art really important. That makes the connection really important. That makes the local ownership really important. Those are the things that are now the most important, not the engineering budget.
So can I say something? Yeah, just like, I'm hearing all this, and I'm also, as a former city employee, like just thinking about like how many decisions that were made in crisis that are still harming our city today. I'm thinking about sidewalks, the fact that the city has now put the onus onto property owners to fix sidewalks, and so now in some places, like we do not have adequate sidewalks because of a decision made in 2008. We currently have so many parks, but not enough park employees to maintain them because of decisions and cuts made in 2008. So it's like, it's interesting to hear this conversation of all these things we should do, but it's like the big elephant in the room is that we don't have money, and we have not prioritized staffing up the city in a way that we can actually address all of these issues, right? Because when you're talking about community engagement, that is so much time and so much energy and so much care, and then at the other side of that, what was that?
Tired.
And yeah, I believe you, because I remember I was doing the same thing, and so when I'm thinking about like, when I would show up to community meetings, I'm not just showing up as Mikayla. I was showing up as every single decision that the city has made previously that has harmed someone. And so I have to move past and try to create trust with someone to even have the conversation of, hey, do you want to do free emotional labor for us? Hey, do you want to come in and like give your opinions and like really have to parse through your feelings about the city and decisions and policies that were made that did not include you or your family or your like eons and eons before? So it's like, I so appreciate what is being said here, but I'm also trying to balance that with the very real issue is that we are in a city that is still living off of the crumbs from 2008 and previously that have never been adequately addressed.
That's a wonderful point. I'm glad you brought it up, and I see it a lot too in my own work as not only a consultant for the city that is community outreach, but also as a neighborhood advocate and a native. And what I find a lot is that we get a lot of decision paralysis in the city because the magnitude of the issues that we face is so large. Often staff would tell me, well, that's true, but where do we start? We have that problem 1,000 places. So this segues perfectly, and I think you all read the script, but Chuck didn't. But somehow, one of the strongest lessons from Strong Towns is to start small and learn as you go. So what's a small bet Sacramento could make tomorrow that would make a real difference? And I'm going to start with you, Ari. If the city could change one engagement habit that rules and slows down progress or prevents meaningful progress, what would that be?
This is so good because I feel like I have a lot of things, but I'm gonna keep it cute. And also it segues from like the previous questions. So one thing that I think that, and this isn't even just for the city of Sacramento, this is for like all cities. I think that like a rule of thumb when you become a city employee, it doesn't matter the department, but I'm gonna specifically speak for like planning departments and economic development departments and probably public art too. I think that it's important to, I'm a historian, y'all. I was trained that way. And so, and I'm gonna even say that I have a Sankova bird tattoo on my leg, and it means to go back and get. And I know that's a simple phrase, but I believe that it's, everyone should go back and study the generations before you. And so if you are in a planning department, you need to study the previous planners before you and the projects that they did. and because it gives you foresight to the kind of problems that you'll hear from when you speak to community members. And it probably would cut through a lot of the trauma dumping that you have to hear from community members, because you are aware of what has happened in the community that you are working in. And so if there's one of the first things I would change is just study I don't want to call them cohorts, but like just study the staff members before you and the work that they've done. Because there was a Ari before me, right? There's a Mikayla before Mikayla, there's a Dawn before Dawn, and there's a Chuck before Chuck. And just, if we didn't do the right thing, okay, but just be aware that we didn't do the right thing and that it's your job and it's your task to fix it before you can even do the projects that you actually want to do. The other thing that I would say for all cities and the city of Sacramento, please, so your first question to me was how to do authentic engagement. If you want to do authentic engagement, please stop. I know we're at a capacity issue, so that's another thing, but please stop outsourcing your engagement. You don't connect with your you don't connect with your community if you have someone from the outside going into your community as a city staff. And I just sat up here and told y'all I was tired, but also it makes a difference that I show up when I do engagement. Whether I'm tired, whether I'm black and blue, whatever, people are gracious enough and they're aware enough to know that, you know what, she might have been tired, but she showed up and she listened to us. And she did what she could, or he did what he could. And so that's my second thing. And then the third thing is, we talk about the levels of engagement. A lot of engagement is the lower tiers, so we're just informing folks, and we're like, hey, we're doing this in your neighborhood, it is what it is. If we can get to a point where we can shift to empower our communities to make more decisions for themselves. I had the opportunity to serve on the redistricting commission, and when we talk about putting the decisions in the hands of community members, City of Sacramento residents have the chance to redraw district boundaries when we're doing redistricting. That's as close as empowering your residents as you could get. So if we could have more opportunities like that and put that in the engagement, that would you would see like happier residents.
Absolutely. So Donald, moving on to you about small steps. Say, for example, the city had almost an endless supply of $10,000 micro grants that you could give out for art or placemaking. How would you pursue small incremental projects like that?
Yeah. So I'm going to start out. I told you I weave these themes in with my appropriation. So I'm going to start out with this Adrinko symbol, this West African symbol, Sankofa, that you brought up. But go back and fetch it because I think it is important to look at the past. And so one of the things that I would do is I'd look at something like this. I am the masses of my people, and I refuse to be absorbed. I am Joaquin. The odds are great, but my spirit is strong. So some of you may know what that is, and some of you may not. And so it's a really important epic poem by a poet and boxer named Corky Gonzalez. And it really helped catapult the Chicano movement here first in California. And it's called I Am Joaquin, or Yo Soy Joaquin. And so I would look at some of that kind of history and connect with local business, like my friend Richard. I don't know if he's here tonight, but he's starting a new business called La Cultura Bookstore. And I try to create a small opportunity for artists to partner with different organizations, different groups, like La Cultura. So give that artist $2,000 and create something around that particular business. I can't stop there. Okay, give me a second. Now, in addition to that, I also, and I've said this. I tend to say stuff over and over again to people when I'm thinking about something, And this corridor is just incredible. Del Paso Boulevard, y'all, is just, it is so perfect, especially for the arts. It's already very much welcomed the arts for years and years. It has the ability, probably more than any other corridor in the city, to have the most incredible First Fridays and Second Saturday type art walks. It just, you know, I don't know that it's possible anyplace else as much as it's possible here. Hire musicians, hire ambassadors to help people through, so that there's a kind of a safe space and things can be lit up, or people can be directed to where things are, and have music and performance in different spaces. Perhaps maybe they're vacant spaces. Some of the property owners, again, pay it forward. So opportunity to have a performance. You see this outside performance, and then you go to the next gallery space or restaurant. So it's this idea that with that $10,000, you then have multiple events. And then the very last thing I would say, I have more than this, but the very last thing I would say, and please appropriate all of this, steal all of this. The very last thing I would say is, again, this idea that we take that money and combine it with something that's already happening. So if you have a taco festival, for example, you then connect with that. And those people welcome you in and allow maybe an arts experience that happens outside of that. Maybe it's a nighttime thing where there's projection happening while that festival is going on. So as you're going down the corridor, you have these kind of nighttime projections or other LED type sculptures, again, through this $10,000, but you allow that money to grow because you find another existing event organization to kind of tap into and to work with.
That's a really cool thing to envision. You know, sometimes we need a lot of money to do big things, and sometimes we need just a little bit of money to do really big things.
And a lot of people to be engaged and want to be part of that. And again, that's that other word, engagement. That's going to be the real key, that people want to be part of that. People want to be kind of part of that process.
But to get back to the core of the matter, we want those people to have ownership stakes within that. So, Mikayla, what policy tweaks could we change to help community land trusts or other small developers do more with less bureaucracy in their way?
Yeah, I think something like let's get that vacancy tax and like use those dollars and also kind of push those folks who are holding on to land to make it more advantageous to just leave it instead, or to use it instead of just leave it. I think something else is community land trusts are also an incredible organizing arm. Like the whole thing is that we are in communities working with folks and building power in disenfranchised communities. And communities like disenfranchised, they have been intentionally left out of so many decisions, right? And so if there was a policy or a way that like these bigger developers could make space for these small developers and for community land trust to participate and kind of like, hey, so it takes a lot of money and a lot of energy to do that engagement. How about you have the community land trusts kind of do that engagement? Also, look, we've already been here for so long. This is the information. This is what we're hearing. And I think just like that would be so amazing. Community benefits agreements. Oh my gosh! Like the fact that we have to, that folks are hemming and hawing about making sure that communities are represented in the developments that happen is a little wild to me. And it feels like. And I think also too, what would be the best thing that we can do is to make sure that developers cannot give to elected campaigns. Like I do not think that developers should be able to give money to elected or aid campaigns. Because how can you not like make decisions with that on your mind later when you're on that dais? And also too, like when like you never stop campaigning. When you're an elected, you never stop campaigning. So yeah, take money out of those places, put it into some other places, and any more policy things. I could go on and on and on, but I think those are the big ones that just come to mind.
Definitely. Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just gonna say, you quoted me to me earlier. No. When we were talking privately, you said something that I feel like it makes sense in this context because we've talked about like where are the resources coming from, and I'm gonna say this: the city spends an obscene amount of money right now on things that don't provide a lot of value to people. And that's not a bad reflection on City Hall. That is every city in the US. That's just the way we have set up our local governments to operate. I have said in a number of places, and I'll say it now, this is what you quoted me as saying, I think our city staffs should be reduced by about 3/4 of the technical people. I don't know that we need as many technical people on our staff as we have today. I would replace those positions then, and it would be more than a 3/4 increase. It would be a greater than that, with people who are really well versed at conflict resolution, social work, interpersonal relationships. Because if you're looking at a city and you're saying, all right, we're done expanding, we're done building new 6-lane roads to nowhere, we're done building new entrances to strip malls, like we've got it all, we built all that. Now we're trying to like maintain it and make better use of it. What that really is dealing with block by block conflict. And engineers, planners, technical people, that's not their expertise, it's not what they do. Who does that? People who have a degree in conflict resolution, people who understand social work, people who are from the neighborhood. And so I do think that the city of the future looks a lot less like a bunch of technical people trying to sell projects and access state and federal money to do like the next thing. And it looks a lot more like artists, social workers, people doing conflict resolution, out working block by block by block, making the city a better place. And that is a different way to think about local government. Very much is.
Okay, well, you fired about 3/4 of the people. They're all good people, and they're all going to pivot to conflict management. So it's all good. Okay, well, to close this topic, though, Chuck, you've seen cities make those small steps and start this, and sometimes they start and they stop, and sometimes they stop and their momentum carries them forward to the next best thing. What helps small cities and large cities sustain the momentum when they're working incrementally?
Okay. Sustaining momentum is really simple and really hard. The simple thing is that you do it and you don't get hung up on whether it works or not. If it doesn't work, you just move on to the next thing. And when you have something that works, you keep working at it, working at it, working at it. It's like growing a garden as opposed to doing some kind of finished product. A garden is like constantly weeding and changing, adjusting and pruning and making it this go. And you have to be very comfortable with that messiness, that continual kind of tending process. The one, so to me, like that's the easy answer. And the places that kind of commit to that or have that as part of their DNA can make a lot of progress really, really, really quickly. I think of, like, from a safe streets standpoint, Jersey City. We had Barka Patel speak at our national gathering 2 years ago. And this is a woman who was hired to make streets safer. She had a department of one person and she had no budget. And so, but she was empowered to do it. And she's kind of a kick butt kind of person. So she went back to the storage shed, found some extra leftover paint from the parks department painting the tennis courts, and went out and started painting safety things at dangerous intersections. And no one stopped her. So she kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it. And things got safer. Jersey City today has had no deaths on their streets for I don't know how many, multiple years in a row. One of the safest cities in the country. And it started with this woman out doing like little incremental things. Here's the trick. The places that I see that are able to sustain it are often the poorest places in the country. I think Buffalo has one of the best kind of bottom up, we're gonna go out and do incremental things that I've seen. Memphis is another one. Shreveport is another one. These are places that financially can see the abyss. And because of that, they tend to not get caught up in the trappings of, well, that's my street, you need a permit to do this, and you need, it's like there's no one telling you to say no, and so you go do it, and then pretty soon you do enough of it, and the city comes out and is like, that's working, and they start doing it, and they start doing the next thing. Those are the places to me that are seeing the greatest gains. And I feel like the challenge we have when we get higher up that affluence scale is to make room for people to, again, I'll go back to that co-create kind of thing. Make room for people to own it, and you're building it with them, not for them.
As a resident of a city with a multi-year structural deficit, I just heard that we are in good shape to change things, so we gotta get some work. All right, this last question, I'm not gonna be prescriptive about who answers when, but each one of you up here is representing a piece of the puzzle: planning, housing, art, engagement. How do we get all these systems to work together instead of inside their silos? So take it away.
So good. I previously, for like 4.5 years, I lived in the city of Raleigh, and I worked for their planning department in comprehensive planning. And I was super stoked because I don't come from a planning background. I come from a historical background. So I was like, oh, they let a historian in the planning department, yay, like, we're gonna do this. And then the director, they were so welcoming and so open to what that change looks like to have a historian in the department. And so they were actually listening to me. So now I can be a little outlandish and say the random things I want to say, right? And so a part of it is, so Chuck, you mentioned this earlier about not working vertically and working horizontally. And I think that if we can, in the city, we're trying to get there. We're working on it. We're not quite there yet, but we're churning slow wheels. But I really do think that a lot of things can be mitigated if we cross-departmentally worked. And sometimes that looks like, I don't know, and it doesn't even need all the directors to be there. It could be the staff members there, the admin analysts, the program managers, the program specialists, whichever. They're meeting and talking about the projects or programs that they're doing and how they're interconnected. And so with the city of Raleigh, their county, similar to Sac County, which is Wake County, it's a large county, encompassed Raleigh the same way Sac County encompasses Sacramento, city of Sacramento. And the county basically wanted to create these bus rapid transit corridors to connect the smaller towns to Raleigh, because that's where the money is, that's where the jobs are, all the things, right? And they were like, well, how are we gonna build these transit corridors? Because most of them were in predominantly and historically Black neighborhoods. And as we just discussed briefly here, you can't just go into a Black neighborhood and say, we're gonna build these things. It's not gonna happen. So the conversations brought planning together, they brought the art department together. So the city of Raleigh, they have a cultural resource management department, for lack of a better word. And so now you have historians, you have artists or public art people and planners all sitting down and talking together about how this one project is going to take all of them to do, because we are in the process of placemaking and we don't want a community to be upset that we have to do this transit corridor. And so my long answer is breaking those silos is sometimes you just need to talk to your coworkers across the hall. Like, call them up. And I know we are at capacity and sometimes we don't have the bandwidth or the time, but we need to make the time to talk to our coworkers. Economic development needs to talk to planning all the time. Economic development needs to talk to public art. Economic development needs to talk to, I say JDW in the crowd here. We need to talk to transportation
JDW
as well.
is a department, right?
But I say JDW, but like transportation and things of that nature. So yes, and also economic development needs to talk to. We work very closely with our climate action and sustainability team as well. All of those things are interconnected. You cannot do one without the other, and so it's imperative that we talk to each other. And you keep talking. Sometimes the meetings are bland, and then maybe the very next meeting is a lot going on, and we're like, oh snap, okay, we need to all have hands on deck there. And that's a part of the breaking the silos, and that's one, relationship building, but also sustaining.
Yes. I think you put it right. I have a friend and artist named Brett Cook from the Bay Area, and I had brought him in to Sacramento. I've known Brett for over 15, 20 years, and he was working with this group, and he just put 2 words up, and said community and collaboration. We just had an entire conversation just about community and collaboration. And then afterwards, I said, so this was great. I mean, we had a great dialogue, and I said, so what's the next step? He's like, I just want to go out and make friends with people. And so, and I guess why that was so profound to me was I had an artist that was working on Northgate, and she was having a little trouble connecting with folks. And I said, why don't you just like go with that taco truck and just have some tacos? And or like go out to dinner or have a coffee. And so we're doing the same thing in the city. I'm proud to say I know both of these folks, one from a council office, another from community engagement. We are really, I will say, I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back, but I think there's a large group of folks in the city that would like to see us. We meet in a kind of there's a group of us that meet once a month. I don't always make all the sessions, but there's an active opportunity. And it kind of comes down to what Brett said. I mean, like, we just kind of make friends, and there is something to do that. So something that matters. And it doesn't mean that, I mean, it can be professional and it can be the work that we're doing, but you get to know people. And you get to know people both in the place where you work, which happens to be, the city for us, the city hall, but then also within the community. I mean, it's the same thing. And so I'm going to invite all of you that I'm fortunate enough to have an opportunity to be able to do some public art for the new old North Sacramento library that's going to come here. Yes. And that I'm so excited, at the old Sacramento News and Review building. And so I want to, really invite all of you to be friends with us. Let's have that conversation. Let's start those dialogues. And I'm ready to do that. I think that it takes all of us being willing to take that step, reach out, meet people, have those conversations, and be part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, like, same. Because, like, no, I mean, I think we're all touching on, like, these really great things of relationship building. And one thing about me is I love a standing meeting. I will meet you every single month. And guess what? Sometimes we'll just be chatting. And the fact that you know that you're going to be able to see this person again, so there's something on your mind, you can be like, okay, write this down next time we talk. Also, as a community organizer, I think if I can try to add something different to this conversation is being okay with making mistakes and being okay with failing in public and being okay with learning in public. It is so uncomfortable to be in community. It is so uncomfortable to be vulnerable. And the fact that sometimes we don't say the thing because you're like, oh my God, what if I don't say it correct? It's like, it's okay. If someone is really so caught up on the way that you said something, I don't think they're listening to you in the first place. So it's like, it's all of this plus really thinking about the community member that you want to be and having that person show up wherever it is, right? And I think about, like, it's so easy to complain. I am a #1 complainer sometimes, and I have to remind myself to be like, hey, Mikayla, take a step back. Why specifically you're having an issue with this? Okay, let's think about that. Let's be more curious. And I think that curiosity can take the place of judgment. And that is something that I'm still learning and striving to do. And so I think it's like, be okay to be silly, be okay to be messy, be okay to say the thing that you think like, oh, maybe this wasn't the right thing to say, but hey, you said it. And guess what? The world didn't implode. At least it's not going to implode because something you said. It might be something else that's happening. But like, I think it's just like showing up as a full human, and we spend so much of our time at work or volunteering or like being with our families or all these things, right? And it's like, if you can't just be a human while you are existing in your day-to-day life, like that is really, really hard to do. And so, yeah, I think like my favorite thing about meetings is, and this is gonna sound, I'm not saying this on purpose, like when they're over, right? Because when the meeting is over and you're taking your time and you're getting your stuff and you're like, oh, hey, how was that thing that you did? Oh my gosh, how are your kids? It's like those spaces in between the meetings and before the meetings. Those are the spaces where true relationship and community building happens. Okay, I'm done.
I'm gonna say one quick thing. So you quoted Jane Jacobs earlier, and one of the things that Jane Jacobs taught me reading her work is that the city is supposed to ultimately work for the people and not the people work for the city. And so when we think about the liveliness of our neighborhoods or not the liveliness of them, the call is coming from inside the house, essentially. And I think it's important to realize that like the city is only as good as its people are. And we need to pay more attention to that, I feel.
I have a 5-book contract with Wiley Publishing. I've written 3 books. I'm working on the 4th one right now, which is on economic development, and the 5th one is on the structure of local government. Let me give you the pitch for that book. If we look at the structure of local government right now, it mimics the wisest business structure coming out of World War I and World War II. We won those wars with an Army, a Navy, an Air Force, a Marines, generals, colonels, majors, captains, structure, hierarchy, and silos. And the kind of pinnacle of business planning coming out of World War II was if you want to do something really efficient, you organize yourself in hierarchies and silos. That's how you do things. And really, there's a lot of people who criticize government for being inefficient today. Government is like radically efficient. We have really rigid silos and structures that can do the same thing over and over and over again. The problem we have and the thing we struggle with is changing, adaptation, doing things differently, being flexible, being adaptable. And if you look at how businesses have evolved since the end of World War II, we saw the structure, the rigid structure kind of die off in the late 60s and early 70s. And by the time you get to the 90s and the 2000s, companies were structuring themselves around teams. We're gonna have a team that will do this and a team that will do that. And hierarchies became a lot flatter and a lot more diverse in their internal expertise. Cities need to do the same thing. And I think the place that I've seen do this the best is Memphis, Tennessee. It's not perfect, they still have some structure, but what they've done is they've created geographic teams that are basically like, we own this neighborhood, we're working with this neighborhood. And the thing about that I love so much is that oftentimes collaboration in government is the most powerful department, which is generally your public works department or engineering department because they have the most money allocated to them. They will do their plan and then they'll send it to everyone else to comment on, and we'll call that collaboration. And then we'll have a public hearing and we'll call that public input. What you do in Memphis as a true collaboration is you sit down in a team of peers where the technical person and the non-technical person are in equal standing on the team. And they actually look at the problems of the neighborhood and say, how do we address them? And this year we might need a little bit more public safety and a little less engineering. And next year we might need a little bit more parks and a little bit less maintenance. And you adjust that based on the needs of the neighborhood. I think if we can move to that kind of model, we won't, and I'm gonna say this, and this is not a critique of any of you or what you said, but we won't have, in a sense, like forced collaboration. We'll have a more natural collaborative structure where I'm not gonna say every voice at the table will get a say, but you'll naturally have more of the complexity of a place represented in the ongoing decision-making and service provision than you will currently with these really rigid silos and structures that we have today. I'll say this other last kind of thing. The way you negate the need for great collaboration is to do smaller projects. When we do huge steps and huge transformative things, we need lots of collaboration and lots of discussion. If we're doing small block level tactical things over and over, you can be less worried about collaboration because literally the stakes are very, very low and you're learning as you go. And so I'm not against collaboration. I think it's great when we all communicate and talk to each other, but I actually think we need systems that lower the stakes and have more collaboration in their structure, and then I think we'll get the kind of outcomes that we're after.
Incredible. Why are you reading my script? It's amazing. Literally it says, what I love about this conversation is that it highlights how change doesn't come from one department or one grant. It comes from relationships, from trust, and from small city acts of courage that build upon one another, which is what I wrote to improv.
We're just on the same
what you just said. It's wonderful. I do. I love just the breaking down of everything here and those little micro moments that we find, right, where the magic happens. I think some of that, unfortunately, was lost. I mean, as a diehard Zoom user, Teams can go to heck, but as a diehard Zoom user, we lost so much from the pre-meeting conversation, the post-meeting walk out to the car, how are your kids, what's going on, have you seen X, Y, and Z lately, how are they doing, oh, I need to connect you, that reminds me, all those little magic moments that are really important to us connecting.
So true.
And I think about it, I think about like DoorDash and every delivery system. We just disconnected so many human interactions in our lives at the sake of convenience, and what we've lost is all those little magic moments where we get together. But that's why we're here tonight, and that's why we're not just talking at you tonight. Now is the section for Q&A. We have a few minutes, and if anybody would like to come up, I have a microphone right here. I see George Raya is asking. I see Dan Allison's walking up. Some familiar face. No, Dan's going to the bathroom. But George, come on up here. George, a nice short question, and then we'll hand it to the next person behind you. Back
Am I good?
Yes.
Okay. You've given us some great books, but I want to mention another book that I just rebought. The Other America, which was printed in 61 or 62. I bought the 50th anniversary issue. It's about poverty in America, and it is really what governs how our cities were created. In Sacramento, we build out because we got the land, but also because developers have such influence, and elections cost money. Developers have the money, and so they've bought the politicians. And so what does Sacramento have? We don't go up, we go out, which costs us more, as you said, and we can't sustain it. So how do we change that?
Such a good question. I came from Raleigh, and I don't know if you've all been to Raleigh, but there is a prominent private school, a historically black private school, in the middle, smack dab in the middle of downtown. And throughout downtown Raleigh, there's probably like 4 major universities. And Raleigh, their planning department has the interesting task of they have to build up because they can't build out, because the land is owned by the university. And so when I was there from like the years 2020 to like 24, they were addressing the issue of like, well, we're cash poor, but we might have a land rich, but that also means we need to build up. And I guess it allows them to be more creative when they build up instead of building out. Getting creative is part of my answer to your question for building up. And Chuck, or anyone else?
I mean, I've written 3 books about this exact same topic, and we're going forward. This is the entire Strong Towns movement, is, how our development patterns shifted after World War II from building cities incrementally over time to building them all at once to a finished state. And really, I think we can point the finger at developers, sure, in a way, but this was like a national policy. This is how we're going to build our cities. This is how we're going to fund our infrastructure, build our highways, stagnate our neighborhoods. And, we're fighting a battle against a system that imposes stasis on our places. Even the idea of a 30-year mortgage, which is so commonplace. I mean, most of the people in here who own a home have a 30-year mortgage or had a 30-year mortgage. A 30-year mortgage is a 3-decade agreement for stasis. And it's a contract for stasis. Our ancestors, and I say that in the broadest sense of the word, never had 30-year mortgages. They had shorter term financing. It's a very different way to finance commercial property and local real estate and your own home. And so we have created this model that, yes, I think there's a role for developers that we can talk about. There's a role for the city. There's a role of the federal government and financialization and Wall Street. All of this stuff is like together. And I think groups like SacTown are leading the way in the answer, which is we start to do what we can do today in our neighborhoods to get back to a pattern that iterates and becomes better over time.
Yeah, I think something else that I'm also hearing is that we're talking around racism as well in so many of these conversations, and the fact that like so many of our cities are built this way because of racism. They're expanding outward because of white flight, and so it's like we can't forget the fact that so many of the decisions that are made today are made on the foundation of racism, xenophobia, and like so much more in classism, right? And so, like, cause I'm even thinking about here in Sacramento, like when we're trying to rezone, like who do we hear from the most about why we should not rezone these single family homes because they want to protect their property value, right? And so it's like we live in a very democratic area, but it's incredibly moderate and conservative, especially as soon as you start to own a home. You start thinking about, you know, like, I want to make sure I can be safe, and I want to make sure that these things, and so we no longer think about building up, and then when we do build up, we're building these luxury homes that are sitting empty. So it just, like, I think that, like acknowledging the fact that a lot of this stuff, and I mean, no one wants to be called racist, and I don't think necessarily that people are holding racism, but they're holding the systems that are created by racism, so they're perpetuating it in the decisions that they're making. So, I got you. But yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's all I got to say about that. Yeah. We'll be here all day.
Hey. It strikes me that naively applied by people in city government, your step 1 and step 2, Chuck, can lead to things like, well, people are struggling with parking. We need more parking. There's traffic congestion. We need more lanes on this road. And other decisions that, you know, as good urbanists, we know don't really lead to strong towns. So there's some level of discernment or of wisdom or education or something that's necessary in that process when applied by municipalities. And I'm wondering how you think about inculcating that into the Strong Towns process for them.
Well, I went rather quickly through it. Let me go a little slower through the first 2 steps, because the first step is humbly observe where people struggle to use the city as it has been built. The inherent with humility is going out without an answer and actually looking at, you know, what am I observing? I think it is a very rare place. They exist, but I think it's a very rare place where you would go out with humility, watch how people use the city and say, wow, I am just seeing like a total absence of enough parking here. You might find that in some places, but I sense not. It certainly wouldn't be the urgent thing that would come to the top. The second part, though, I think is more operable, and that is, what is the next smallest thing we can do right now to address that struggle? I intentionally say the next smallest thing and address, not solve. Because we're not trying to, in a sense, solve the problem. I think the mindset that says solve the problem is the one we have today, and it's the wrong mindset. What we have to do is iterate and make it better. Because when we change something, another problem will come to the fore. And then we have to iterate on that and iterate on that. And so, limiting ourselves to the next smallest step, I think addresses a lot of the concern that you have, because the next smallest step for a parking problem will never be tear down this, and that's too big of a step, right? The next smallest step for a parking problem will almost certainly be, how do we get more people here without needing their car? How do we make it easier for someone to walk across the street? the places that I've actually seen do this in practice never end up in the place that you're concerned with. I think that part of, and taking your concern seriously, I think that part of the inherent assumption in what I've proposed in the 4-step process is that if a technical person were going out, they would want to be with other non-technical people. Because I think one of the hang-ups that engineers have, for example, is that, you know, the hammer-nail problem. I go out and every problem's an engineering problem. I don't know a planner who at one point in their life has not believed that every problem in humanity could be solved with a zoning code, right? Whether it's like Mideast peace or cancer, like get the right zoning code, it'll fix it. So I feel like when you send those technical people out, you're probably gonna wind up where your concern is. If you're sending those technical people out, I think they need to be surrounded with other people who can help them with the humility and the next small step. Is that fair? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm a local homeowner in this community, and I think in today's world we need more humans being human to each other. So I kind of want to get your thoughts around what does human being, you know, within your capacity look like, and then what does the human side that you're talking to look like as a community member, and how can we reciprocate that back?
I'm gonna speak from like personal experience. So my family has been here for decades in D2, and I could call my mom or my aunts or my dad or uncle, and they could probably tell me every person or every family member, like what parcel they used to live on, their address. And there's still times where I'll walk around in the neighborhood and they'll be like, "Oh my God, you're a green," and I'm like, "I don't even know who you are," but they know my family. So the interaction, this is like a simple answer, but like the human interaction of being more connected here is, and part of this is a part of like capitalism that we don't have the time to do this, but talk to your neighbors more, even if you feel like you don't have anything in common, because the more you talk, the more you might find that you do have things in common. But also, again, that's just a part of the long building relationship, especially if you're gonna stay at your property for as long as you want to. Again, just the fact that there are so many families here in this neighborhood who, that my family can just go talk to, and they're like, "Oh yeah, so-and-so lives on this corner," and I'll be like, or growing up, me knowing my friends, and then turning out that the elders in my family know the elders in their family, and we didn't even know that they were connected. That doesn't just happen out of nowhere. That is human interaction, and that is your neighbor borrowing sugar or saying like, "Oh, can I use your water hose today?" or something of that nature. Or maybe your son goes to cut someone else's grass, and now you're building the human interaction. Things like that.
If I could, I'm just gonna say right off the bat, I'm completely biased, but I do generally feel that the arts and artists can be that human connection, can be the kind of the griot of the neighborhood, the storyteller that shares those experiences. Can be from within the neighborhood, but also can be that person that works with a community or is part of a dialogue and challenges that community in some ways. And so one of the pieces of public art I love most actually is a piece that's very challenging. It was a piece by an artist named David Hammons. It's called Higher Goals. And it was these just enormously high poles with basketball hoops at the top. And I mean, he was just challenging his neighborhood and the people there in New York around what that meant of what these kids' kind of visions were. Sometimes art can be challenging, and that's okay. And I think that that's how we can also share some connection. Sometimes art could just be just this wonderful thing that reminds you of some kind of beauty or connection that you have. I think that's a wonderful part of it too. So I definitely think that this is a time where the arts can play just such a nurturing and important role. Especially speaking of some of these types of traumas that you were talking about, the jury segregation that clearly was kind of set up historically. Last thing I'll say on this is I was fortunate enough, actually, Mikayla, I think you were part of the council office at that time, to work on a project in the River District called Marohn Village. And before Marohn Village was there, it was this public housing called Dos Rios. And y'all, it wasn't by mistake that public housing was right in the middle of industrial, just really kind of nasty areas down there in the River District. And I'm not saying that I'm talking historically, okay? But this was an area that historically flooded. This is where industry was. They put this community, predominantly black and brown people, right in that space. But through a number of different folks working together, SHRA, HUD, got to give it up to the federal government on this one too, and a lot of different community groups like Alchemist, a local CDC, they were really able to, and this is an ongoing community now, to build that. And I think they recognize also that arts could be a valuable part of that. So I think the arts can be a part of those human and community connections. And when we're building neighborhoods, we shouldn't just be building the structures, but we should be helping to kind of build the neighborhoods. And now they're going to be starting a market, ongoing farmers market down there as well. So just putting it out there for the arts and culture as a really valuable way to connect.
Yeah, and I think also too, I want to say on the flip side of when you own a home and you think more about property value, I think the anecdote, I always get anecdote and antecedent, I always say the wrong thing. Anecdote to that is when you know your fellow community members, it gets less about what about my property values, what about my community? What about my neighbors? What about their families? And so I think about some of these neighborhood associations, like the Boulevard Park Spaghetti Dinner. I think about National Night Out and how there's neighborhoods, I know George, and I see you right there, but do the progressive dinner where it's okay, there's appetizers here, and there's dessert here, and there's there's another meal in there as well. But anyway, just those moments to do things together as a community, right? Because I think about so I lived in an apartment building. It was 7737 Collegetown Drive. My mom went to Sac State, and I was just one of those little kids running around this apartment building. And the fact that there was all these kids here, and we all knew each other, and we would get home from school and be okay, let's go run to this playground, let's go to the American River, let's go do this stuff. And so we built our little kid community, and then because we were doing birthday parties together, and we're doing all these fun things together, our parents started talking, and then our parents became friends. And then now it's I know these folks for the rest of my life, right? Because there was opportunity for kids to be kids outside and in space, and that just kind of trickles its way up into that humanness, right? And so yeah, I think ditto. And yeah. And just have a party, throw a party, put on a Spotify playlist, bring out your grill, just invite people without any expectation from them. And just be I want to be in space with you because I care about you. And then that humanness and those conversations, and when something comes down the line, you already know who's in your neighborhood. You already know maybe there's a person who's wheelchair bound, right? And so it's a little bit harder for them to get outside. It's okay, let's make an effort to do it. And when you have a whole community that's deciding and making the choice to be a community and make an effort for each other, it expands everything.
The last thing I'll just say, it's also simple, is that whatever stores or places are in your neighborhood, become regulars there. Know your folks on first name basis. There are countless places I can go to, and they might not know my name, but they know my order. And so they're oh yeah, you want the the double shot, and yes, I do. I do. And it's an unspoken human interaction. It's like, we might be awkward and we haven't asked each other our names yet, but we know each other on a basis that, like, you know, when I come in, you know what my order is, and I appreciate that. So, yeah, great question.
Fantastic. Okay, wrap it up here. Just a few words, each of you. You know, we live in such difficult and challenging times. We wouldn't be here today if we didn't think there was hope for our future, for our community. So really quickly, just down the line, 5, 6 words. What's giving you hope?
Ooh, what is giving me hope is the fact that there are people who continue to show up, and that, oh my God, people give me hope. The fact that, like, people just exist and they want to be here, and the fact that y'all came tonight. And so I think just like people having babies, right? Like, just be like, oh my gosh, you are putting into this world this piece of hope for the future because you want this world to be good for your kid. That was more than 5, I'm so sorry.
Gives me hope that artists and creative people and all of us can make the place that we want, can be an active participant in that making.
It gives me hope that, not to say that history repeats itself, but that people are aware of history, and so they know to stand up for themselves. And it may seem like people are dormant now, but there's going to be a pivotal point where the people stand up for themselves and push back.
I got off the plane today from Minnesota, and I went to Del Campo High School, and I met there with a couple of teachers who are helping their class do crash analysis studios, go out and study dangerous intersections and places where people have been hit, and even some places where people have died on streets. And you can't not have hope when you talk to young people who care. And these are kids who join a club. They don't have to be there, they don't have to do it, they don't have to care, and they do. And you recognize that that's not an uncommon thing. You have to have hope. So, thank you.
Thank you for coming out tonight, Chuck, for flying in, for Ari, Donald, Mikayla. Thank you all for sharing your insights. Thank you all for who stuck around with us all night long. Really appreciate you. And thank you to the Rink and all of our hosts and everybody who made it possible. If you want to know more about how you can get involved with this local movement here, the website, StrongSacTown.org. We have a meeting every first Thursday of the month at 6 o'clock. That's not where the action happens. That's where the planning happens. And then we go out in the streets and we do things. We do things every month that are impactful. We do the next smallest thing, and we rinse, repeat, do it over and over and over again. So get involved, get engaged, stick around, get some snacks on the way out, another drink, and mingle a little bit. But we're so glad you were here tonight. Thank you, everybody, for coming out for a great conversation.